Behind these walls lie a whole lot of history, and outside these walls lie a lot more.
In this documentary, we will be discovering the facts about this historical castle as well as Pembrey itself. As we walk down Church Lane, we come across Pembrey Courthouse Museum.
This courthouse has been running since Tudor times until it was closed in 1886. The courthouse includes prison cells, an exercise court and original Tudor windows. The courthouse now serves as a local town and hall museum. Let's find out some more facts and stories about the courthouse.
Well, the courthouse, it's like lots of old buildings. It's sort of grown organically, you know. I mean, it's thought to be Tudor originally, and we've got two jail cells downstairs, and about 2 years ago we had all the old rendering taken off, and we found one of the original jail windows behind the rendering with one of the original walls. Now that wall is really old, the archaeology says, because they've got bits of reclaimed Roman brick and everything in it, that it probably is genuinely old. The rest of the courthouse we don't really know. The timbers are probably quite old, but it was rebuilt in about 1831. And the robing room, which is through that way, is 1831. So it's like a lot of these buildings, there are bits from sort of all ages in it.
How many prisoners could be held there at one time?
Well, we got 2 cells, so we could hold 2 prisoners. But by 1831, we were only allowed to hold prisoners for 24 hours till they went to Lewis. So I guess some of the prisoners would have been smugglers, village drunks, thieves, crooks, all kinds of people.
Is the courthouse linked to any well-known historical figures?
Not as such. There are lots of interesting figures, because the courthouse was sort of, you know, the castle represented sort of the royal power. The courthouse represented sort of the borough of Pembrey. So, I mean, there's some interesting people. There's a prisoner called Bill Maynard, and that was around coming up to the 1830s. He was a smuggler, and he was captured bringing brandy in. Rest of his gang escaped. He got arrested with one of his sort of colleagues, put in the jail down here. Now they went to bring him up to put him on trial. Local magistrates from Pembrey were sort of saying, "Oh, it's Bill, what are you doing here? You're bringing some brandy in, we can't convict you for that." So they called for a magistrate for Eastbourne, who came down, made them say, "Well, you're going to stand trial in Lewis, but you've got to stay here overnight." And he was worried they might escape, so Art said he'd put a guard here, which they refused. Lo and behold, within 2 hours of him leaving, they'd sawn their way out the cells. And they were seen, and Bill was seen at Who Fair dancing, but he had such a gang around him they couldn't arrest him. So after that, they said Pembrey Jail was, they said, a rickety old shed. So that's when a lot of it was rebuilt, to make it sort of, you know, far more, you know, secure.
St Mary's Church is a historic church believed to be the first built by the Normans in 1180, standing west of the Pembrey Castle entrance. It still stands strong today and serves the community as an active parish church.
It's a very historical building. It was one of the first churches to be built in this country. And when William of Normandy landed pretty much where we're standing, he, after conquering the rest of Britain, he decided to actually fund for a church to be built in this location. There's a chance there may have been a sort of Anglo-Saxon building at that time, but it's likely that it was one of the first churches built in this country. And sometimes we take the children over to actually show them parts of the Roman the Norman walls that are first built.
We are now at our main attraction, Pembrey Castle. When William decided to leave England in 1067 to make his triumphant tour of Normandy, he decided to set sail from Pembrey. In fact, Pembrey was the site where William the Conqueror landed in Britain on the 28th of September of that year. There, the Normans found the 4th century Roman fort, upon which they first built the first incarnation of Pembrey Castle in timber. The main outer walls of the Roman fortification have stayed very much intact, and now is in the main area of the castle.
These Roman walls are among the very best Roman remains that survived in the UK. Pembrey Castle itself, found in the southeast corner of the Roman walls, mostly dates back to the Norman invasion of 1066.
Yes, so Pembrey Castle is a fascinating place because it's got so much a varied history. It's not just a Norman castle. It contains a Roman outer wall. Parts of it were built by the Normans as an old-fashioned Motte and Bailey castle, but they actually positioned it inside the Roman walls itself. And it was also used most recently in the Second World War as well. There was an old-fashioned pillbox at the top, and it would have been used if there was a potential invasion of Britain back in the 1940s.
Pembrey Castle is thought to have been built about 290. Now, it was built under the reign of two emperors. There was one more, Courthouse, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was the naval commander, and he took over Britain from the Roman Empire. He, several years later, was murdered by his treasurer, assassinated, who took over the bit of Britain from Courthouse, and in turn Constantine came back and got Britain back. So they think that's the period it was built, because when they did excavations they found coins of those two emperors underneath some of the original blockwork. So you can guess that if they're there, they were probably dropped when they were originally building it. So the common story is that Pembrey Castle was built as a Saxon shore fort to stop marauding Saxons sort of attacking Britain. But there must have been a bit of it as well, that it was also built because under the reign of these two emperors, they must have been wary of the Romans coming back to reclaim this part of the empire. So maybe it served a double purpose as well.
Well, we have got the old jail in Pembrey Castle, which would have been used to potentially used as almost like an old-fashioned prison, particularly during medieval times. And within there are some interesting artefacts discovered in this local area. We have had archaeologists around our school grounds quite recently doing metal detecting, and they found some medieval coins. They found artifacts may have been left by the Romans, so we've got a whole range of things around this area. There is one legend in the old the courthouse. There is a legend that when I think it was Edward the Sixth stayed in that room for an occasion, and there is a legend that his spirit still lives on in there. So that's one of the haunted tales around this area. We've also got within the castle, you've got the old dungeons, and I'm sure there are lots of tales of people who may have deceased in that chamber.
How do you think history has made Pembrey so well known?
I mean, basically, it's one person. It's the Conqueror landed here. But apart from that, I think it's its long history as a port. I mean, even in Roman days, it was a port. The Romans, if you go a little way inland to Boreham Street, there was a Roman harbour there. They'd haul the boats up. The reason it was important is because to the Romans as well was because of the iron. They'd smelt iron, Ashburnham, over near Battle as well. They'd bring it down and through Pevensey. So it remained a port right up to 1699. And that was the last year you could actually sail a 50-ton boat all the way from the sea, right up to the bridge at the bottom of here. And then because as a port, because it's low lying, it either flooded or the shingle built up and it got landlocked. So it was constantly changing. They then decided it was time to sluice the river off, and it then became sort of inland, and that was it. That was the end of Pevensey as a port. So I think all its years of history have made it quite important.
So the Old Mint House is another building that we've got in Pembrey and West Ham. It looks like an old-fashioned Tudor house, and it would have been used to store things of important value. Hence, their mint, almost like an old-fashioned bank, as it were. So I'm not as an expert on the Old Mint House, but it's another historical building that we've got within Pembrey and West Ham.
I can tell you the favourite story about the Courthouse was the last person who was a prisoner here, and this was in about 1886, which is about the year that Pevensey Town Council was abolished, and about the last time the courts would have sort of sat here. And the last prisoner was somebody called Betty Breach, and Betty Breach, the story is that they lived in a cottage near the castle gate, and her husband used to only go and sit by the castle gate, offering to tell stories to visitors for, you know, a few coppers. But they all describe him as having a considerable thirst. Now, what that meant was one day he was in the Smugglers, which was then the New Inn. It was Sunday. Obviously, she had cooked the dinner. She'd gone in. He was in there with the magistrate drinking. She had sort of said, you know, your dinner's on the table, it's going to be ruined, etc, etc. Picked up the glass, emptied it over them, threw it on the floor, walked out. The magistrate said, oh, that's disgusting, we've got to arrest her. So she was arrested, put in a jail cell downstairs. There was a big outcry around the village saying, you know, this poor old lady, she sort of suffered her husband, getting drunk all the time. So the magistrate decided to let her out, but she wouldn't come out of the jail cell because she said she hadn't done anything wrong and she wanted an apology. So her husband and the magistrate had to come here, down to the cells, and apologise to her, and then she left. And she was the last prisoner in the cell, so...
So the main building that we're in at the moment is actually part of the old school building, which was built about 80, 90 years ago or so. In terms of what the school used to be like, and on the high street you will still see the original school building, and it has 2 classrooms on the bottom level and 2 at the top, and it would have housed probably to begin with 1 or 2 classes, but has since expanded and now contains over 400 children.
And that's all we have time for. After exploring the historical village of Pevensey, we have learnt the hidden stories behind these castle walls to landmarks around the village.
Join us next time when we explore further up the coast and have a look at these marvellous, extraordinary historical castles. Until next time, this has been
A